officially welcome all of you to the World Affairs Council's Council Cabinet exclusive tonight. We are so honored to have Jean Becker with us. She is going to give a phenomenal program on Pearls of Wisdom. And I know some of you might be familiar with the subject of her book. I'm not going to say too much more about it because she's going to enlighten us. But right now, I just want to say, well, we're so thankful that you've joined us tonight. It's going to be really insightful. And now I'm just going to turn it over to Sandhya, who is going to kick off our official start.
Yeah, wonderful. Again, good to see all of you. Thank you for joining us. And I see some of those that don't have a screen on, Bill, Jacqueline, Aziz here, Watson, just making sure that we don't see you. It's okay if you choose not to see us. Actually, it's not okay. I'll take it personal. But just want to making sure that was by choice and you didn't anticipate it. So again, so wonderful to have you all here and so honored to welcome Jean. Jean, welcome.
Wow.
Good to see you.
Yes, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
It's ours for sure. Some of us perhaps know something about Jean or something less or something more. So if you will allow me just a quick bio kind of reminder, all her, or at least highlights of her accomplishments. Jean was Chief of Staff for George H.W. Bush from March 1st, 94 until his death, November 30th of 2018. Just think about it, 94 to 2018. She previously served as Deputy Press Secretary to First Lady Barbara Bush. That was from 89 to 92. And before joining the Bush White House staff in 89, Ms. Becker was a newspaper reporter for 10 years, including a 4-year stint at USA Today, where her duties included covering the 98 presidential election. Think about that. You cover presidential election and then you work for 18 years for the president, and a page 1 editor. Her book about Mrs. Bush, Pearls of Wisdom, became New York Times bestseller.
Hold it up. Here it is. Yes, Pearls of Wisdom.
Bestseller when it was released on March 3rd of 2020. So with much further ado, here's Jean, and Jean lives here in Houston. So isn't that fantastic? Jean, welcome.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, and honestly, I know this is important to you, not related to the book. Remind me your friend's name. I'm sorry, technical issues. Jahan is asking to make sure that we have her proper spelling and that we address that.
Oh, her name is Laura Pears. Pears is in the fruit. I'm sorry that she's being a problem.
Not at all. We were saying earlier that there are all kinds of forces trying to sabotage our show, but
yes,
we are not to give in and that. We don't accept it, and we're just going to move this train along. So, Jean, wanted to see how did your paths with the Bush family cross? More of a, did you find them or did they find you? How did that come about?
I met them when I was a reporter for USA Today. I was a member of USA Today's 1988 election team. And my job, I was the feature writer for the election team. And I think there were 15 people running for president in 1988. And I did a series for USA Today called The Candidates at Home. So I got to travel all over the country and interview the candidates and their spouses in their home. It was so much fun. I mean, what a great gig. Who wouldn't want to do that? And so I first met George and Barbara Bush at the vice president's house. It was right before Christmas, 1987. But then how I really got to know Barbara Bush during the fall of 1988, USA Today convinced Barbara Bush and Kitty Dukakis to do a weekly diary for us. It was called Behind the Scenes on the Campaign Trail. It ran every Monday in September and October, and I was their editor. And it was an assignment that at first I didn't like. I wasn't very thrilled when I was given that assignment. It was so much fun. I got to know both Kitty Dukakis and Mrs. Bush really, really well. And when the election was over, I was shocked when her chief of staff offered me a job in her press office. I had to think about it. I thought about it for 2 weeks. And then my dad said, "What on earth is wrong with you? You're being invited to the White House to work for the First Lady of the United States. What is wrong with you?" And I said, "You're right. What is wrong with me?" So the rest is history.
So then the question is, do you recall the first day that you met them? I'm sure you did.
I very well. I actually met the vice president. I traveled with him on a trip to South Dakota and interviewed him on Air Force Two coming home. I was a nervous wreck. He was the most important person I'd interviewed in my life up until that point, unless you count a phone interview with Billy Joel. Um, I was very nervous. And then I met both of them again when I was doing the At Home series. It was right before Christmas 1987 is when I met both of them together for the first time.
Wow, just a little bit of information to share. And we know today we wanted to speak quite a lot about the pearls and
Pearls
where
of wisdom.
now, where are the
Yes.
pearls. So,
I have on pearl earrings.
so before we jump, if I can hijack the show, you know, those who know me, I have no shame. But let me throw in this really neat story. If I can show you this, can you see it? Can you see it?
Uh-huh.
Is it reflecting? This is yours truly. There's Barbara, and there's myself with the same pearls that I have today. That's Senator Bailey Hutchinson. Wonderful memories about 18 years ago, and I had Barbara said, "I really like your pearls," and I said, which Barbara was wearing too, and I said, "I really like yours too," and I said, "Barbara," I didn't say Barbara, I said, "Miss Bush, mine are not real," and she said, "You know, many of mine are not real either. For some reason, my mistake, I assumed that most of hers are real,
Yeah,
but
they were not
every
real.
time I wear this, I have to think of Barbara Bush." So how did the book come about, Jean? Where was the, how did you start?
The book came about, so True Confessions, I wrote this after she died. And in my book tour, which was mainly, the book came out in March of 2020, which if you remember, that's about the same time the pandemic came out. The timing was awful. So most of my book tour was Zoom events exactly like this. And one of the questions I was asked a lot, how did Barbara Bush publish a book after she died? Because we put her name on the cover of the book and not mine. And the answer why we did that is because it is her voice in this book. It's not mine. This book is about all the advice she gave out over the years. The woman was a black belt advice giver. And there had been a lot of books written about her, but I always felt there was something missing. And then I realized it was all her pearls of wisdom. And I emailed her 5 children, including the 43rd President of the United States. And I said, I would love to do this book to honor your mom. But I need your permission because I can't ask her. So I asked them. And because we put her name on the book, I did donate all of the author's proceeds to her literacy foundation, the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. And you can put that picture up of her reading to kids. That was her passion in life, was making America more literate. So I gave all of my proceeds to her literacy foundation. But I almost felt like, and George W. wrote a very funny prologue for the book in which he said, those of us who knew mom and got all that advice from mom, we have an unfair advantage over the rest of you because everybody needs to hear Barbara Bush's pearls of wisdom if you're going to live life right. And so he thought it was a great idea for me to write this book.
I'm going to go ahead and kind of turn it on to you, and let's run straight through the book. And I'm going to mute myself as well, and the show is going to be yours, and I'll be connecting your phone. So,
well, I'm going to tell just a few pearls of wisdom from her book, and then I want to leave plenty of time at the end. I would love to hear your questions and what's on your mind. And I will warn you, if you don't have questions, I have an endless supply of stories, so I'll just tell more stories. So you might be thinking of your questions. Oh, thank you. That's Mrs. Bush reading to a group of kids. That's what she did. That was her great passion. And the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy is still going strong today. In fact, I have a board meeting on Monday. But she really felt strongly about making America more literate. Okay, you can probably take that photo down. I like to look at all of you. So what I did is I emailed just about everybody I could think of. It was very random. All of her kids, all of her grandkids, a variety of other family members, all of her former personal aides, and then just really random people. Everybody from Reba McEntire to the Oak Ridge Boys to Bill Clinton, a lot of her author friends. And I just said, send me a paragraph on what you learned from Barbara Bush. And the answers just poured in. People were so excited to tell their stories. And the stories are very diverse. Reba McEntire talks in the book about how Barbara Bush taught her how to seat a dinner party. One of my favorite is Bob Gates. Bob Gates, who's one of the most fearless people I know, talks about how he learned the hard way. Don't ever put the last puzzle piece in if it's Barbara Bush's puzzle. You will get whomped. Another one of my favorites is a woman who was sitting in the green room with her, and Mrs. Bush lectured her on the fact that drugstore lipstick is just as good as fancy lipstick. And if you're buying Chanel lipstick, or if you're buying your lipstick at Dillard's or Macy's, it's a waste of money. And she tells, so it's, you know, it's a little thing, just things just sort of all over the board. And one of the things I would like to read to you is that Mrs. Bush knew she was bossy. I think she was proud of the fact she was bossy. And this is what she used to say in her speeches, particularly when she was talking to students. She used this paragraph a lot. She says, now I can't give you any advice on how to be a good teacher or a writer or a scientist or an actor or a dancer. I especially cannot give you advice on dancing. But at this point in my life, I can share with you some ideas on how to survive the inevitable ups and downs. After all, in 80 years of living, I have survived 6 children, 17 grandchildren, 6 wars, a book by Kitty Kelly, 2 presidents, 2 governors, big election day wins, and big election day losses, and 61 years of marriage to a husband who keeps jumping out of perfectly good airplanes. So it's just possible that along the way, I've learned a thing or two. By the way, by the time they died, they had been married 73 years. So when she gave this little talk, they'd only just been married 61 years. So she knew it was bossy. She was bossy, but it didn't stop her. And how lucky again were we to be the recipient of her advice. And I mean, on any given day, she would say to me, now, Jean, that's so interesting you would wear your hair like that. Maybe you should get it cut tomorrow. And you know, you would just learn to say, yes, ma'am. And I would go get my hair cut. But I thought there are 2 passages in this book when I was researching the book, in addition to the advice that everybody sent me on things they learned from Barbara Bush, I also included a lot of her speeches from when both she was First Lady and then after post-White House, because her speeches were full of advice. And one of the things as I was working on this book in late 2019 that struck me is how really wise this woman was, and how her advice, her pearls of wisdom has very long legs, and how much we need her voice now. There are 2 things that struck me that I would like to particularly share with you today. In 1991, when she was First Lady of the United States, almost all of her commencement speeches had one major theme: the need for better tolerance in our society. There was obviously something going on in our country that she was very unhappy about. And I tried to find out what it was, and I'm not sure I was completely successful. It was right after the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. Some of you might remember those. I think that could be possibly our first incidents of police officers arresting and beating a Black man. It could have been that. It also, of course, was the year before her husband ran for re-election. And my guess is all the Democratic candidates were beating up on her husband a little bit. But I would just like to read to you just a couple of things that she said to graduating seniors that year. And I wish, and I've used this a lot this year because I think it's a message that we needed to hear in 2020. She said, I would like for you to think about your relationships in a broader sense, the way you feel about and interact with people beyond your loved ones and beyond the people you know here in Pueblo. She was speaking in Pueblo, Colorado. And the friends you've made so far. I'm talking about the great need for better tolerance in our society. To be different. That is what life in America is, after all, about. It can be difficult to be different in our society. It is too easy to be intolerant. Tolerance is much more than just respecting people of a different race. It is a constant stream of little acts in our daily lives, big and small choices we face every day, and the way we think about and talk about and deal with other human beings. It's about respecting people who have a physical or mental handicap, people who grew up different from the way you did, people who speak a different language or practice a different religion, people who are fatter or thinner or older or younger. We have a proud legacy of freedom and independent thought in our country, but we can be better. You can help us be better. I just love that message. And I have read this to a lot of kids. And in the beginning of my book tour, I used to cry reading that passage. But just, you know, it's just, again, we need her voice, I think, today. The other passage that really struck my heart are the speeches she gave after 9/11. And she was really trying to figure out a way to help America get back to feeling safe and to getting on with our lives. And so much the advice she had then, for us then, certainly resonates in our pandemic world. So I'm going to read just a couple. Don't panic, because I think there's 10 points here, but I'm only going to read you a couple of them. Again, she gave this just a couple of months after 9/11. And when she talks about troubled times, that's what she's talking about. And again, she says, this is where I got the idea for the book. She says, for the name of the book, what I'd really like to do today is to share some of the things I think I've learned in life. You can call them pearls of wisdom. So she named the book, which is appropriate since it's her book. Number one, there's always something to be thankful for if you take the time to look for it. Unfortunately, it seems to me that especially in these uncertain times, people are always looking for the bad and never the good. Sometimes it's easy to do that, particularly when we're dealing with very scary issues. But that's when it becomes even more important to look for the good. Just the other day, I heard someone complaining about how much everything cost, and they couldn't afford a thing. Their friend answered, living on Earth is expensive, but it does include a free trip around the sun every year. I love that little silver lining. There are very few situations, no matter how sad or tragic, where most of us can't find something to be grateful for friends and family, for our country, for our faith. It's such a waste of energy to dwell on the bad and not rejoice in the good. Again, can we use that advice today? I mean, how many days do you all wake up and think, wah, 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 you know, the pandemic, I can't go anywhere, I hate my life. And Barbara Bush would say, get over it. There's always something to be grateful for. I'm just going to read one more of the points she made. I read the saddest thing the other day. Most of us go to our grave with our music still inside of us. Please don't let that happen to you. Too many of us live our life too hesitantly. We're afraid to speak up at a meeting, to raise our hand, to volunteer to take on a project, to ask a girl or a boy out on a date, to go someplace we've always wanted to see, or yes, sing or dance or paint a picture or write a poem. Quit making excuses and get involved. And while you're at it, have some fun. And here's a little hint. No one will notice or care if you're good at any of those things. They'll just be thrilled you're enjoying life. I do love that advice. Actually, I lied. I'm going to read one more. Learn not to waste time. I think that's something we all need to hear during the pandemic. I don't know about you all, but I waste way too much time watching Netflix. That doesn't mean you have to work hard and play hard every single minute. Enjoying a good book, taking a nap on the back porch, watching it rain. This is all time well spent. Staying angry at a friend, worrying about things you can't change, watching reruns on television. Those are precious moments lost. It is just a sweet little book, just full of Barbara Bushisms. And I hope you'll find the time to read it. I will shamelessly say it would make a wonderful Christmas present. And keep in mind, all the proceeds go to the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. I did want to share one more story with you because you are the World Affairs Council. I thought you all might enjoy this story. She talked about, this is when she was the wife of the vice president, and she talked about how she had to literally learn on the job on how to be the wife of a diplomat. She'd had some experience when President Bush was a UN ambassador, some experience in China, but when she became the wife of the vice president, it was like jumping off into the deep end. And she tells a very funny story. She wrote about it in her diary, and I found it and put it in this book. So I would just love to read this to you. As the wife of the vice president, I wrote this part. As the wife of the vice president, I'm gonna have to take my glasses off. It was the longest they'd ever lived in one house during their entire marriage. 8 years. They had never lived in one house in 8 years. Not that they were home much. George Bush was perhaps the most traveled vice president in history, covering an estimated 1 million miles in 8 years. And almost everywhere he went, Barbara Bush went with him. She loved telling stories about her travels and the people they met. She compared Imelda Marcos to Marie Antoinette. She felt that Nicolae, I can't pronounce it, Ceausescu of Romania, I didn't pronounce that right, was a truly, who say it?
Ceausescu.
Thank you. I knew you would know. And she fell in love with Margaret Thatcher's husband, Dennis. She would be the first to tell you that she often learned how to be a diplomat's wife the hard way, by trial and error. She wrote this in her diary in April of 1982. Now, this is Mrs. Bush's words. During a visit to Japan, George and I had lunch at the Imperial Palace with Emperor Hirohito. During that most memorable lunch, I sat next to the emperor, and I found the conversation pretty heavy sledding. He had a yes or no for everything, with an occasional thank you. We were sitting in the glorious, relatively new palace, so desperate for something to talk about, I said that the new palace was lovely. Thank you, he answered. I tried again. Is it new? Yes, said the emperor. Finally, I tried again. Was the old palace just so old that it was falling down? He turned with a charming smile on his face and said, no, I'm afraid you bombed it. I turned to my partner on the left. I do love that story. And that's how she learned to be a diplomat's wife, trial and error. So this book came out in March of 1990, and I basically did my book tour by Zoom, just as I'm doing tonight, and it actually worked pretty well. But a lot of people, my friends and family, would tell you that I was crazy and I couldn't just sit around and try to swim through the pandemic. I wrote another book. I just finished at 10:30 last Sunday night. I sent the final draft of my new book to New York, and I would love to show all of you the cover of that book. Can we see the cover? There it is. This book is basically about the almost 25 years that I was President Bush's chief of staff, the man I knew, and it's just a series of stories. George Bush left me such a great legacy of stories. He was such an amazing man to work for. And I'm going to share one story with you tonight that I say in the book. This was the story that inspired me to write a book. So can you put up the picture of President Bush with Prince Bandar? So most of you probably know that Prince Bandar was the ambassador from Saudi Arabia to the United States, I think for almost 25 years, 20 to 25 years, for a very long time. He was the ambassador all during President Bush's presidency. I think he was the ambassador for a big chunk of 43's presidency. He was very close to the Bush family. The Bush kids used to tease their dad that Bandar was his Arab son. But they had a close relationship. He was, of course, ambassador all during Desert Storm, so they had to work very closely together. So in the summer of 2012, I was at home watching the Summer Olympics when my phone rang, and it was Margaret Tutwiler. And as most of you know, Margaret Tutwiler was James Baker's spokesperson at the State Department throughout President Bush 41's presidency. President Bush 43 made her ambassador to Morocco. Just a wonderful person. But Margaret called me at home, and she wanted to know if I had heard rumors that Bandar had been assassinated by the Syrians. And I didn't know how to tell Margaret that this is typically not the kind of gossip that I would hear. I said, no, I've not heard anything about that. And she said, would you mind making some calls and checking your sources? We are hearing from mainly the French press that Bandar has been assassinated by the Syrians. And when she asked me to check my sources, I knew what she meant. She wanted me to call the CIA, because President Bush had a very special relationship with the CIA. He, after all, had been head of the CIA back in the mid-70s. So I told her I would check it out. So I called my point of contact at the CIA, and she said, we're well aware of the rumors. Bandar has not been seen in public for months. He was no longer, I should add, he was long past being ambassador to the United States. He was back in Saudi Arabia, and he basically was head of the equivalent of their CIA. He was heading the Saudi intelligence services. And he'd not been seen for months. And my CIA contact said that the Syrians were very angry with him, and they think the rumors were probably true. So I wanted to wait until I had confirmation before I told President Bush, because I knew this would be really hard news to give him. And so Margaret called me a couple hours later, and she said the French press had gone public with it. In France, it was now being reported that Bandar was dead and he had been assassinated by the Syrians. And she said, I think CNN will pick this up quickly. So if you haven't told President Bush, I think you need to tell him. So President Bush came down to the office. We were in Kennebunkport, Maine at the time. And this is before he was in a wheelchair. He had not been diagnosed with Parkinson's yet, but he was getting more and more fragile, and he would drive around Walker's Point on his golf cart. And on days when he was feeling particularly fragile, he would holler in the office and want me to bring work out to him. And we'd sit on the golf cart, which was fun. And particularly on a beautiful day, and do our work, go through all our discusses. So I went and sat on the golf cart with him. And I told him everything that had transpired. And I said, I have not heard back from the CIA, but Margaret Tutwiler says the French have now gone public that Bandar has been assassinated. And President Bush looked at me and he said, well, did you try calling Bandar and asking him if he'd been assassinated by the Syrians? I'm sure it will not surprise any of you to learn it had not occurred to me to call Bandar to ask me any of this. And I said to President Bush, sir, I cannot call Prince Bandar. And he said, well, get him on the phone. I'll ask him. So I hollered into our office to the young man who was his personal aide, Jim Appleby. And I said, Jimmy, could you please get Prince Bandar on the phone for President Bush? And Jimmy leaned out the window and he literally said, have you not told him? And I said, yes, I have told him that he would like to talk to Prince Bandar if possible. So literally 30 seconds later, Jimmy leans out the window and says, Prince Bandar on line 1. And President Bush picks up the phone and he says, Bandar, dead or alive? Everybody here thinks you're dead. He's on the phone. I'm sitting next to him. He goes, uh-huh. And then he turns to me and he says, he's alive. And I said to him, yes, I have caught on to this. Anyway, Bandar told him that he was well aware that he says, yes, Mr. President, the Syrians are trying to kill me. I'm way ahead of them. I'm in hiding. They will never find me. I'm safe. Do not worry about this. And so they had a nice visit. And then President Bush gets off the phone. He says, Jean, this has been a very good lesson for you. If there's ever any doubt if anyone is dead or alive, the best thing to do is to pick up the phone and call them. And if they answer the phone, you can immediately get rid of the rumor. And he was just so proud of himself. And he said, now who all thinks Bandar's dead? I said, well, Secretary Baker, Brent Scowcroft. So we called them all up. And he said, yeah, Bandar's alive. And anyway, right after he talked to Brent and Secretary Baker, he left on the golf cart to go back to the house for lunch. And I'm back in my office just laughing at all of this. And my phone rings and I felt really bad because I answered it and it was the CIA. And the CIA analyst said to me, we still do not have definite confirmation, but we are fairly certain Bandar is dead. We're almost positive he's been assassinated. So we think you better go ahead and tell the president. So I took a deep breath and I told her that Bandar was alive. And a little bit indignantly, she said, how do you know that? And I said, because President Bush called him on his cell phone and he answered the phone and they had a nice conversation. And she waited a couple minutes and then she said, you know, we need to put him back on payroll. So that whole story told me I got to write a book. I got to put, you can take that picture down. It's just such a great story. And I have 100 of them like them just because President Bush was so fun and he could be exhausting. I write in the book that the 5 scariest words during the 24 years I was his chief of staff is when he would walk into my office and say, "Jean, I have an idea." And I'd be like, ugh. And some days it would be, "Let's go get pizza for lunch." I'd be, "Great." And then other days it would be things like, "I've been thinking about jumping out of airplanes. I think I'm going to start parachuting." And then the biggest one by far was the day he dropped the bombshell that he wanted to go back to Chichijima, where he'd been shot down during World War II. It is not easy to get to Chichijima. It's a volcanic island very close to Iwo Jima. Ironically, we eventually had to lean on the Japanese Navy to get us there. So just think about it for a minute, that the Japanese had to take us back to the island where they shot him down during World War II. Anyway, you'll have to, I want to hear what's on your mind. So you just have to read the book to hear the rest of these stories. It comes out June 1st.
Save the date. We are hosting Jean in May. I'm just
Yes.
saying, with more stories to come. Now that you heard
More stories to come.
just think about what's in Jean's back pocket.
I do want to share just one more picture. Let's skip the book. Well, no, let's show both of the last pictures before we go to Q&A. This will be quick. The first one, I just wanted to share. Can you imagine being a student in the George Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M? I don't know if you could read the screen, but it says the National Security Policy Recommendations for the President of the United States. He used to sit in, they used to run mock national crises, foreign policy crises, and President Bush would sit in and sort of be their judge and jury. I mean, how lucky are these kids? And he loved it, and they knew how blessed they were. And a lot of these graduates, they are at the State Department. There's a lot of them at the CIA. A lot of them have gone to CIA. So I just wanted to share that picture. Okay, I confess the last picture I pulled to share with you, this is just gossip. This is just for fun. Can you show this picture? This is at President Bush's funeral. The Trumps have just arrived. Before the Trumps arrived, all the presidents were like blip, 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 talking to each other. When the president and first lady arrived, everyone sat down. I just want you to look at Michelle Obama's face, President Clinton's face, Hillary's face, Dick Cheney's face. What wouldn't you give to know what they were all thinking at this moment? I mean, this picture, there's just so much going on here. And I just thought it'd be fun to show it to you. I came across it the other day, actually looking for something else. And I pulled it because I knew I'd want to use it one day. And I wanted to show it to you tonight. We could write a whole chapter just guessing what they're all thinking at that moment. Yes. Particularly Hillary. The difference between the look on Hillary and Bill Clinton's face is just classic. He obviously is about ready to burst out laughing. And she does not look happy. Anyway, you can take that picture down. Now I would love to hear what's on your mind. What questions do you have for me?
That was so mesmerizing. I think we all traveled with you back and forth in the White House, maybe Air Force One and other places. So I'm sure you have so many stories to tell, and I'm sure there's so many questions that our members and friends of the council would like to ask. So kind of the usual protocol, if you have a question, if you raise your hand, we'll make sure that we unmute you, or actually you can mute yourself, that we give you platform to ask, and the other ones will listen, and Jean will answer the questions. So who may I pick on? Otherwise I'll be like a teacher, I'll just pick on you, you know how it goes. Who's ready? Who's ready?
Or I will tell another story.
Yes.
You may get tired of my stories. I see someone's nodding. No one has a question?
I see that Ray raised I saw a little, yes?
Okay.
Hi, Jean.
Hi, Ray.
Thank you so much. You can see the shirt I'm wearing, my alma mater.
Oh my gosh, Aggies.
And I don't know if you can see the background picture.
Yes, I can. Now I do.
That was specially chosen for this evening.
Thank
I don't
you.
have a question so much as just every minute I've enjoyed this. And we have, I should say, my family, an old connection going back to President Bush. In 1964, my father was his campaign manager for Galveston County when he ran for Senate.
Oh my goodness.
Unsuccessfully. And then
I'm sure it was not your father's fault.
he won't take the blame, but he was a big Goldwater Republican back then. And anyway, after that, my father rose through the Galveston County party like structure, but President Bush, in all his various manifestations, always stayed in touch with him all the way up until he became president.
He was amazing that way. He stayed in touch with everybody.
Yeah, he really was.
The man was tireless in writing notes, and he was amazing in that way.
So it's special, and it was always special for my father. And we actually, our little claim to fame is that he took a shower at our house and spent the night there on the campaign trail back then. I wasn't around yet, but and of course the connection to A&M is very special. And I don't know if you can speak to that any. I don't want to take away from other people's questions, but
the connection to A&M.
Yes.
Of course, he did not go to A&M. Of course, he went to Yale. But President Bush, the city of Houston wanted his library badly. And they came up with a number of proposals that would have put his library in Herman Park. And it would have been a joint project of Rice University, the University of Houston, and the city of Houston. But President Bush had spoken at Texas A&M a number of times over the years, and he just loved the spirit of the place. He loved the core. He just felt that A&M just spoke to his heart. And of course, there were some questions about putting his library at Yale. And President Bush would tell you that he's fairly certain Yale probably would not have wanted his library. But, A&M, he maybe was a Yale graduate, but A&M had captured his heart. And, Bob Gates was the president of Texas A&M before George W. stole him away to be Secretary of Defense. And Bob read parts of the book for me. He read all the CIA stuff. I wanted to stay out of trouble and not print anything I shouldn't print. And he also read the A&M parts for me. And one of the things that Bob said to me was, I don't think you go on and on enough about how much he loves A&M. And so I added, he says, when I don't know if any of you remember this, but when President Bush died, a train took his body from Houston to College Station for the burial. And when the train pulled into College Station, it was amazing. And, there were thousands of Aggies, and they played the Aggie, what would you call it, Ray? The fight song, the war song?
The Aggie fight song, or the war hymn, the Aggie fight song.
The war hymn.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think Aggie war hymn, that's it. That's what I was looking for. And Bob had been, of course, at the funeral at the National Cathedral the day before, but he hustled back to Texas because he wanted to be there when that train pulled in, and he was. And of course, that's where the Bushes are buried, at Texas A&M. It was a special relationship.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's special for we Aggies. And I actually have a niece. My niece is now finishing up her grad school, work there at the Bush School. And some of my friends and I always say we graduated 10 or 15 or 20 years too early. We would have liked to have been there when they were there. But I did see them a few times walking around the lake back there, he and Barbara.
He loved it up there. I only tell this story in Houston. I cannot tell this story in Maine. but in the fall of 2018, Mrs. Bush died in April 2018. So President Bush spent his last summer in Kennebunkport without her. And he died November 30th, 2018, to give you some time perspective here. The 2-year anniversary of his death was this past Monday. And we knew his time was coming to an end. It was obvious. And there was great concern. The Bushes always left Maine in October and came back to Houston. And there was great concern that he would not survive the trip back. It's a 4-hour plane trip. And so his chief medical aide, a wonderful young man named Evan, said, we need to talk to him about where he wants to die. Because President Bush loved Kennebunkport. He loved Walker's Point. He could literally lay in bed and look at the Atlantic Ocean. And Evan said, I'm thinking we should stay here. I think we should stay here till the end. And I said, we need to talk to him about it. So talk about a hard subject to bring up. So Evan and I sit down with him, and I guess we're beating around the bush a little bit. And even then, President Bush cut to the chase, and he said, are you asking me where I want to die? And I said, yes. So all you Texans need to know, I always cry. He said, I want to go home. He said, take me home. And he meant Houston. Oh, I still cry. Good God, in March and April, in the Pearls of Wisdom, I cried through half of my Zoominars, and now I don't cry ever again. But whenever I have to tell the story in Houston of him looking at us like we were crazy, he said, take me home. This was home. And so anyway, it's a happy story, right? Okay, somebody asked something else.
I compose myself.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I see that Alice has
Alice.
I just wanted to tell you that my son did the convention here in Houston for him and did many other things in Washington, D.C. for him. And my youngest granddaughter.
Is your son Eric?
Yes.
You're Eric Bing's mother?
Yes, I am.
Oh my goodness, I love that. I love your son. I love Eric Bing.
Well, thank you. He really enjoyed the Bushes. He couldn't say enough good about them both.
That's wonderful.
And my youngest granddaughter worked in the Bush office here when she was in high school in the summers, and so.
Yes, she did. Lindsay,
yes.
She's brilliant. Lindsay,
Yes.
Lindsay Bing.
She's at Georgetown now.
She helped me on the funeral. She was one of my
Yes.
funeral worker bees.
She came home to help, I know. Mhm.
Yeah, she did. Okay, I feel bad I made all of you cry. Okay, so I think I should tell a funny story to end.
Yes, please.
Should we have a funny story?
Yes.
I had a couple of other more foreign policy stories, but forget all those. This is one of my favorite stories, and it's really funny. This is so George Bush. So my little brother, who's 10 years younger than I am, is a Catholic priest in California. And Eddie was a lawyer for 10 years before he decided he was on the wrong track of life. And he went into seminary. So he was 39 years old when he was ordained. So he sort of got a late start on his priesthood, his priestly career, you could say. So in 2011, early 2011, Mitt Romney came to pay a visit on President Bush, a courtesy call. He wanted to tell him that he had decided he was going to run for president again and take on the incumbent president, President Obama. And he was hoping that President Bush would support him. And I'm sitting in the office and sort of a fly on the wall, listening to them visit. And President Bush asked him, Mitt had also run in 2008. And he had come to President Bush's library to give the speech about I am a Mormon, much as JFK in 1960 actually in Houston gave the I am Catholic speech. I did not know that until Mitt chose President Bush's library. He felt he needed to address the fact that he was a Mormon because he was feeling some prejudice about it. So he came to President Bush's library, gave an amazing speech about being a Mormon. And so 4 years later, President Bush asked him, did Mitt think his being a Mormon would be as much of an issue in 2012 as it had been in 2008? And Mitt's answer, it was fascinating. He said, no, not at all. And he said, you know, when one glass ceiling is broken, in this case, he was talking about Barack Obama, the first Black man becoming president. He says, when you break one glass ceiling, the others break as well, or at least crack. And he said, America has found out that, gee, gosh, a Black man can be president. And he said, I don't think my being Mormon, I don't think I will face the same issues I did 4 years ago. So sort of in the context of this very serious, interesting conversation, President Bush says to Mitt Romney, Mitt, are you aware that Jean's little brother is in line to be the next Pope of the Catholic Church? And I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell are you talking about? Eddie, who's in California, he didn't even have his own parish yet. He was an associate pastor, but he was studying in Rome. He had been sent to Rome by his bishop for 2 years to study a variety of things. And they definitely were taking advantage of the fact that Eddie had a law degree. And they sent Eddie to Rome to learn all about the Catholic Church canons of law and blah, blah, blah. So he was studying in Rome like thousands of priests. And Mitt Romney looked at me and he said, well, Jean, that's so interesting. Wow. And I just said, wow, I don't think Eddie will ever be Pope. I said, I don't think there will ever be an American Pope. So I didn't say anything else. And then a couple of weeks later, we're at a lunch with a group of people with the Points of Light Foundation. And again, sort of apropos of nothing, President Bush announces to a table of about 20 people, are you all aware that Jean's brother will probably be the next Pope? I'm like, God. And so this time in the car going after the lunch, going back to the office, I said, sir, you have got to quit telling people that Eddie is going to be Pope. I said, first of all, Eddie is not even the pastor of a parish. And number two, I don't think there will ever be an American Pope. And President Bush says, but Jean, he's in Rome. Don't you think they sent him to Rome? I'm like, no. And so I'm trying, and he said, Jean, I'm trying to start a buzz. This is how it works. Let's start a buzz about Eddie being Pope. Well, President Bush, as most of you probably know, was Episcopalian. And I said, you know, I don't know how the Episcopalian church works, but the Catholic Church, we don't do buzz. We're a dictatorship, basically, and there is no buzz in the Catholic Church. So he told me that he felt I was being very negative. He says, it is unlike you to be so negative. And I said, I'm not being negative. I'm just telling you, Eddie will never be Pope. So I emailed Eddie this whole story, and he thought it was hysterical and dear and touching. But he emailed me back after his initial email, and he said, you know, I love that President Bush told Mitt Romney that and the Points of Light people that, but God forbid, please do not let him ever say that to a Catholic cardinal or bishop. He said it could be quite embarrassing. Do not let him say that. For example, to Cardinal DiNardo would be a good example, Jean, of someone that President Bush should not say this to. Well, I wasn't really worried about him. He and Cardinal DiNardo really don't run in the same circles. And this is when I knew God had a sense of humor. You're going to swear I'm making this up, but I'm not. Literally a couple weeks later, we're having lunch at the Forest Club, just President Bush and myself, and we're going through a bunch of paperwork. And you could see a group of people walking towards us. You could sort of see them out of my periphery vision. And President Bush says, Jean, I think that group of people are headed over here. Who is that? Is that someone I should know? So I sort of discreetly look up and I said, oh my God, it's Cardinal DiNardo. I says, Cardinal DiNardo is coming over to say hi to you. And President Bush says, oh, good, good. I've been wanting to talk to him. And I said, sir, under no circumstances may you bring up Eddie. You may not say to Cardinal DiNardo that Eddie's on the short list to be Pope. And President Bush, I would love to know what Cardinal DiNardo was seeing, because I have in my head that the two of us were like, and I'm just like, no, you may not bring up Eddie. And he says, this is our chance. This is our big chance. He said, Cardinal DiNardo, isn't he in the Electoral College? I'm like, that's one way of looking at it. And I said, no, I said, you may not bring it up. You have to trust me on this. And he says, oh, right. But he said, this is a huge mistake on your part. So Cardinal DiNardo comes over and they have a nice visit. And then at the end of the visit, President Bush says, Your Eminence, my chief of staff is a double dip Catholic. President Bush loved that term, double dip, and no one ever really knew what it meant. And I could tell Cardinal DiNardo's thinking, what does that mean, that she's a double dip Catholic? But before he could, say anything, President Bush said, not only is Jean Catholic, but her brother is a Catholic priest, and he's in Rome. And so then Cardinal DiNardo was very nice, and I would say, well, Jean, where does your brother, where is he, what diocese does he belong to, blah, blah, blah. And then Cardinal DiNardo left, and President Bush said, see, Jean, that's how it works. I have planted the seed. Well, my brother still isn't Pope. I don't think he'll ever be Pope. But I do love that story. I think President Bush, he really felt that he could run the campaign and make my little brother Pope of the Catholic Church.
What a great story, really.
I know we're out of time.
But before, when I say, I know it's a little bit after 6, but I think none of us really, the few minutes, it's the memories that is created. And then again, it's life. You got to enjoy these opportunities as they come. So wanted to kind of, I know I'm going to start crying. Jeez, Louise.
I know, I'm sorry I cried.
Now, I would just take it as a way of thanking you and this group of individuals that support us, and Marianne and myself, with your kind appreciation, would like to extend you a membership at this level, which is our council cabinet member.
Oh,
so
I'm so honored.
You accepted, and we'll be looking forward to welcoming you in this group of people, and virtually for a while, unfortunately.
Oh my goodness.
When the time turns, we would love to have you, of course, your energy, your stories. And I think all of you, if you do even the muted cheer, salute to Jean.
Thank you.
So
thank you for listening. And I hope I see you all in May in person. When it's your turn to get vaccinated, get in line.
Yeah. And for us as the council cabinet members, we have the next kind of end of the year soiree, holiday cheer. We'll do it on a Thursday, December 17th. So a couple of weeks from now, be on the lookout for that invitation. Jean, of course, you are invited as well. And
thank you. I'm so honored.
Yeah, and that invitation will come through. So again, thank all of you. Thank you, Jean, for scheduling, being so flexible on this. And we finally made it. We did, and what a great way to finish year, and what a Houstonians that you worked with. Definitely, I think for the family in Houston, it's kind of goes certainly hand in hand. So it's our great way to thank you again, and wonderful memories created, and some more stories. So now we need to meet your brother, because we'll get off again.
You need to meet the wannabe Pope. Yes. Yeah. I promise in May, I will not tell the story of him wanting to come home to Houston to die. We're not going to tell that story. We are the only ones who will ever hear that story. I can't tell that story and cry and not cry.
Yeah. So I think, thank you again, Jean. Thank you all of your members, board members, supporters, friends of the council, Marianne and Alice, and to your son and your family also for a loyal work with the family. Jean, everybody have a good night. Happy holidays if we don't see you. But remember, there are still more programs to come.
I say one more thing. I've been signing a ton of book plates. So if you have the book or you get the book and you would like it signed, I'm sorry, it will not be signed by Barbara Bush, but I'm happy to send you a book plate. Just,
And we actually interrupt you. We have some books at the office, so we definitely can collaborate with Jean on how to do that next. But we do have some books, Jean's books at the office. So if that is something for you,
Thank
your
you.
family, your members, reach out to Marianne or myself, and we'll definitely make it happen. And as Jean has promised, we'll have the signature included as well. So
That'd be great.
wonderful. Again,
Thank you so much.
have a good night.
Happy holidays, everybody. Good night. Thank you
Thank
for thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye,
Thank you so much.